You've probably heard of it. A runaway train is speeding toward 5 people tied to a track. You're standing nearby, next to a lever. If you pull it, the train switches tracks, but there's one person tied to the other side. This is called the trolley problem, and it's one of the most famous ethical dilemmas ever created. People use it in philosophy classes, psychology experiments, Reddit threads, memes, and debates. At first glance, it seems like a math problem disguised as a moral question. Do you save more people, even if it means directly killing someone else? But as you'll see, it gets a lot more complicated. Because the moment we start messing with the details, who the people are, how you're involved, whether you're doing something or letting something happen, our instincts start to shift. This video isn't about solving the trolley problem. It's about understanding why it's so hard to solve, and what it reveals about how we think, feel, and try to be good people when the options all feel wrong. The trolley problem didn't come from the internet. It came from philosophy. The original version was introduced in 1967 by British philosopher Philippa Foot. She was trying to explore a bigger question. When is it okay to harm one person to save others? Foot wanted to test the limits of utilitarianism, the idea that the morally right action is the one that produces the most good for the most people. So she created a thought experiment: a train, 5 lives, 1 switch, and a choice. A few years later, another philosopher, Judith Jarvis Thomson, took that idea and started modifying it. She added versions where you had to push a person off a bridge instead of pulling a lever. She changed who was on the tracks. She added new situations that made people second-guess themselves. And that's when people realized something. We don't actually agree on what the right answer is, even when the math is the same. Over time, the trolley problem turned into one of the most talked about examples in ethics. It's now used in everything from moral psychology to AI design to philosophy. 101 classes. But it wasn't just about solving a puzzle. It was meant to expose how messy our moral reasoning really is, and how much it depends on context, emotion, and personal values. The classic version of the trolley problem goes like this. A train is speeding toward 5 people tied to a track. You're standing next to a lever. If you do nothing, the train kills all 5. But if you pull the lever, the train switches tracks and kills one person instead. Most people say they'd pull the lever. 1 death is better than 5. It's not ideal, but it feels like the right call. Then the problem gets more complicated. The fat manyar on a bridge above the tracks. The train is headed toward 5 people. Next to you is a large man. If you push him off the bridge, he'll stop the train with his body. He dies. The 5 survive. It's the same math. 1 death, 5 saved, but now it feels different. Pushing someone to their death is a lot harder than flipping a switch, even if the outcome is the same. 5 people versus 4 people now. The train is heading toward 5 people. You can flip the switch and kill 4 instead. Still fewer deaths, right? But now you're choosing to actively kill 4 people. That feels worse. At what number does it stop being worth it? Is saving 5 always right, even if it means killing 4? 5 people versus you, here's a tougher one. You're not standing by the lever anymore. You're the one tied to the track. But somehow you have access to a lever, maybe a button nearby. You can pull it and redirect the train toward 5 other people instead. Saving yourself means 5 strangers die. Letting the train hit you means they live. Now you're deciding if you're willing to die for people you don't know. This version cuts past logic and goes straight to survival instinct. Would your morals hold up if it was your life at stake? Rich man versus poor man. Two people are tied to different tracks. One is a poor man, the other is a billionaire, and he promises you a massive reward if you save him. So who do you choose? Do you ignore the bribe and treat both lives equally? Or do you let money influence a moral decision? This version pushes you to ask, should value be measured in lives or in wealth? Best friend versus 5 strangers. Now you have to choose between saving 5 random people or your best friend. If you pick the 5, you feel like a traitor. If you pick your friend, you let 5 people die. This isn't about logic. It's about loyalty, love, and guilt. And it shows how fast utilitarian thinking breaks down once emotion enters the picture. Each of these versions makes just one change, and that's enough to throw your entire decision off balance, because we don't make moral choices in a vacuum. We make them in real situations where feelings, context, and personal bias all come into play. That's why the trolley problem isn't really about trains or math. It's about how easily our answers change when we're the one on the tracks. The trolley problem wasn't just a thought experiment for philosophers. Psychologists picked it up too, but they weren't looking for perfect answers. They were studying how real people actually think. And the results were complicated. Take the classic version, the lever. Most people say they'd pull it. Let one person die to save 5. Sounds logical, right? Now switch to the version where you have to push someone. Suddenly, most people say no, even though the math is the same, 145. The reason, emotions, brain scans show this clearly. When people imagine pulling the lever, the logical part of the brain lights up. But when they imagine pushing someone, the emotional centers take over. So even when we think we're being rational, our feelings are quietly steering the wheel. There's a name for this reaction: moral dumbfounding. It's when someone says, "That just feels wrong," but they can't explain why. They're not lying. They're just reacting from the gut. Here's something else. If the person on the track is your best friend or your sibling or someone who looks like you, people change their answer. They'll save the one they know, even if it means letting 5 strangers die. Same thing with identity. People are more likely to help those who share their beliefs, their background, even their nationality. So much for fairness. And then there's framing. The way you ask the question changes everything. Say, would you kill 1 person to save 5? People hesitate. Say, would you save 5 people instead of 1? They're more likely to say yes. Same outcome, different words, different gut reaction. All of this points to one thing. We don't make decisions like computers. We weigh emotions, bias, relationships, and wording, even when we think we're being logical. And that's what makes trolley problems so messy. Some people treat the trolley problem like a puzzle, like it's just about math. Save more lives, minimize harm. Easy, but the way people answer says more than that. It reveals how we see ourselves and how we see others. For example, most people say they'd save 5 strangers instead of 1, until that one is someone they know. Then suddenly, the math changes. We care about fairness, but not as much as we care about our own. We also make choices based on how things feel. Pushing someone feels worse than pulling a lever, even if the outcome is the same. Emotion beats logic. almost every time. Sometimes, people justify their choices after the fact. They say they're being rational, but really, they're just trying to explain what they already felt was right. This is called motivated reasoning. We make the decision first, then build a story to defend it. And that story usually reflects who we are, our culture, our values, our fears, our upbringing. Someone raised to value loyalty might save a friend over 5 strangers. Someone raised to follow rules might never touch the lever at all. So the trolley problem isn't just about choices, it's about identity, and how complicated it gets when logic and emotion start pulling in different directions. There's no perfect answer, but how you answer, that says a lot. We like to think doing nothing means we're innocent, that if we just don't touch the lever, the outcome isn't on us. But if you're the only one standing there, if you're the only person who can stop the train, then doing nothing is still a choice with consequences. It doesn't matter that you didn't build the track, or that the train was already moving. The moment you see what's happening, you're involved, whether you want to be or not. Refusing to pull the lever doesn't erase the 5 deaths. It just means you let them happen. That's the hard truth most people avoid. Inaction isn't neutral. It's passive responsibility. Let's put it this way. If someone's drowning in front of you, and you don't throw the life jacket, you didn't push them in, but you still let them sink. Sometimes we choose inaction just to protect ourselves, so we don't have to feel guilt, so we can say, it wasn't my fault, but the result is the same. People still die, and you were still there. Here's a different way to look at the trolley problem. What if you didn't know which track you were on? That's the veil of ignorance, a thought experiment from philosopher John Rawls. It asks, what would you choose if you had no idea who you were in the situation? Not just which track you're on, but whether you're the one tied up, the one standing at the lever, one of the 5 people, or even the train operator. Behind the veil, you forget everything, your status, your wealth, your name, all of it. You design rules as if you could end up anywhere in the scenario. The idea is, this forces fairness, because if you don't know your role, you're more likely to make a decision that is just and fair. Now, let's apply that to the trolley problem. Would you still choose to sacrifice 1 person to save 5? If there's a chance you're the one, would you still flip the switch if your best friend might be on the other track? Would you pull the lever knowing you could wake up tomorrow as the person you just doomed? Suddenly, utilitarian math gets uncomfortable. It's no longer about maximizing outcomes. It's about protecting yourself from a future where you're the one sacrificed. The veil of ignorance doesn't give you an answer, but it changes how you think about fairness. It reminds you that decisions aren't just abstract. They could apply to you, and once you realize that, you stop thinking like a god above the tracks and start thinking like a person tied to one of them. The trolley problem doesn't give us answers. It gives us mirrors. It shows us how we think, what we value, who we protect, and what we're willing to live with. It's not just a question about trains and tracks. It's a question about being human, because we all want to believe we'd do the right thing. But the right thing isn't always clear. And sometimes, the cost of action is just as heavy as the cost of doing nothing. That's why the trolley problem still matters. Not because it tells us what to do, but because it forces us to ask, Who am I in this story? And what does that say about me? In the end, it's not about solving the problem. It's about understanding the person making the choice.